Hey, Soul Stories fam! We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The waltz swelled, gliding through the ballroom, glittering with crystal chandeliers. White gowns twirled, black suits exuded elegance, crystal wine glasses sparkled, all blending into a perfect portrait of happiness. In that picture, only one spot stood out, a man sitting silently at a VIP table, surrounded by unfamiliar gazes. Ethan Blackwood, a name that once made both European and American finance circles wary, heir to Blackwood Capital, the youngest CEO ever to land on Forbes' list, a living symbol of power. But tonight, all that glory was overshadowed by the cold chrome wheelchair beneath him. Ethan sat upright, tuxedo perfectly tailored, satin black tie knotted neatly, his deep gray-blue eyes scanning the crowd. But his gaze carried no joy. It reflected distance, as if he were someone outside the glass wall, watching the party from afar. He had once been the center of it all, a skilled equestrian, a CEO gracing every magazine cover. But since the car accident 2 years ago, everything had collapsed. His spine was injured, his legs numb forever. His fiancée, Clara, left right after the doctor announced Ethan might spend his life in a wheelchair. Friends drifted away, business partners kept their distance. And now at this wedding, he was nothing more than the disabled guest sitting alone. The champagne glass in his hand remained untouched. He didn't even bother to sip. The sharp laughter from the dance floor only made his heart twist tighter. People come here to celebrate love, he thought bitterly, his lips curling into a wry smile. I came here to remember how I lost mine. Memories surged back. The engagement ring he never got to give. Clara leaving in tears, whispering, I can't live this kind of life. The door slammed shut. He stayed behind, alone, just like now. The music shifted into a sweet ballad. Couples drifted to the dance floor. Even the old uncle took his wife's hand, eyes full of tenderness. All the light shone on them, while darkness draped over Ethan. He leaned back in his chair, eyelids half closed. Insecurity clawed at him. Once proud, now nothing but a burden on the world. And then he heard laughter different from the rest. Not the restrained, elegant laughter of the elite, but bright, genuine. The kind that cut through the awkward air of the party. He opened his eyes. At the last table, a young woman in a simple blue dress was trying to calm down a restless boy. The boy put a napkin on his head, pretending to be a superhero, then burst into giggles. The mother laughed with him instead of being embarrassed. In that instant, Ethan felt his shoulders lighten unexpectedly. He didn't realize his gaze had lingered on her for so long. She wasn't dazzling like Clara. No heavy makeup, no glamorous gown. But that smile, that warmth, suddenly made the noisy room fall quiet inside him. For one fleeting moment, he forgot he was in a wheelchair. He even forgot the whispers of pity all around. Then the boy, about 6 years old, pointed at him and shouted, Mommy, look! That man has the coolest chair ever. The entire hall turned to look. Ethan froze. Normally, words like that cut like knives. But this time, instead of pity, the boy's eyes shone with pure admiration. The mother blushed, trying to hush her son. But then she laughed, shaking her head. Her eyes met Ethan's warm, unflinching gaze. And in that 1 second, Ethan felt not so alone. The wedding glittered like a luxurious dream. White silk draped from the ceiling, roses lined the aisles, and elegant laughter rang between clinking crystal glasses. In the farthest corner of the hall, a small round table sat isolated, just like the people seated there. Sophie Miller sat at that table. She smoothed her wavy brown hair and sighed when she realized there wasn't a single familiar face around her. She was 29 this year, though her bright eyes and youthful smile made her look barely past 20. She'd been invited here only because of a fragile connection. Emily, today's bride, had once been her college classmate in literature. They had shared a few books and a few study sessions. But after graduation, Emily had rushed into her career and marriage, while Sophie had been consumed with becoming a single mother. She glanced around. The tables near the stage were packed, overflowing with gowns and polite smiles. Sophie's table, shoved against the edge near the door, felt like a reminder that she didn't quite belong in this world. Sophie inhaled deeply, reminding herself, "Come on, Miller. Don't look gloomy. You didn't come here to impress anyone. Just to give your blessing, eat a slice of cake, and go home." Pulling out the chair beside her, her 6-year-old son Leo scrambled up, his bright green eyes wide as he took in the hall. "Wow, Mommy. This place looks like a fairy tale movie. And that piano is huge, like the one in Santa's house." Sophie laughed. "Yeah, but remember to sit still. We're guests, not the stars of the show." Leo propped his chin on his hand and whispered, "I think I could be a secret superhero. I'll protect the bride from the bad guys." "What bad guys?" Sophie raised a brow. "The ones who don't let her eat wedding cake," Leo replied matter-of-factly, making Sophie burst out laughing, almost choking on her orange juice. That was Sophie's charm. Life had never been easy, juggling double shifts at a cafe, paying rent, caring for Leo, but she had held on to her playfulness and humor. Her clumsy moments, quick jokes, and radiant smile had become a fragile armor against hardship. While Sophie was lost in thought about next month's utility bills, Leo suddenly dropped his spoonful of ice cream and pointed toward the VIP section. "Mommy, look! That chair is so cool." Sophie looked up. In the center of the dazzling ballroom, where everyone could see, a man sat silently in a gleaming wheelchair. Golden light spilled across neatly cropped dark hair. A black tuxedo stretched perfectly over broad shoulders. He wasn't smiling. His gray eyes, like a winter sky, stared off in the distance, not settling on anyone. Sophie's heart skipped. Something about his posture made her chest tighten, not out of pity, but out of recognition. For years, she had grown used to being apart, friends drifting away after she chose to keep Leo when his father disappeared, family blaming her for ruining her future. And now, at this joyous wedding, she was still at the last table, sitting quietly with her son. Her eyes met the man's for just a second, but it felt like he could see right through her. "Mommy, why isn't anyone sitting with him?" Leo tilted his head, voice innocent. "Maybe they're uncomfortable," Sophie whispered back. "Uncomfortable about what?" "He's got the coolest chair here. I want to try it." Sophie gave a nervous laugh, shaking her head. "No, Leo, that's not a toy." But the boy kept staring, his wide eyes brimming with curiosity adults had long since lost. Sophie turned away, focusing on her plate. But inside she was unsettled. The image of that man lingered. Why did a famous billionaire look so utterly alone? Why did his eyes resemble hers that day of graduation, when she stood outside the campus, watching friends embrace while she stood by herself, 8 months pregnant? The waltz shifted into a lively swing. The MC invited everyone onto the dance floor. Applause, cheers, footsteps filled the hall. Everywhere glowed with joy, except for the last table and the VIP table. Both remained silent. Sophie glanced at her son. Leo clapped along with the music, but his gaze kept flicking back to the man in the wheelchair. He whispered, "Mommy, I think he needs a dance partner." Sophie froze, then laughed. "Sweetheart, how could he dance?" Leo wrinkled his nose and whispered firmly, "Dancing doesn't need legs. You just need someone who wants to dance with you." The innocence of his words shook Sophie's heart. She turned her head. The man still sat motionless, eyes half closed, as if the world had no place for him. A strange impulse rose inside her. Not pity, but a mischievous, daring thought. That was Sophie, clumsy, but always bold enough to do what others wouldn't. She took a sip of wine, feeling her face flush. Her heart raced, as if she were about to do something reckless. Leo leaned closer and whispered, "Mommy, I bet he'll smile if you talk to him." Sophie sighed, biting her lip. A voice inside warned, "Miller, don't be foolish. Who is he? A stranger, a billionaire, a man in a wheelchair." But then another voice whispered, stronger, "So what? A smile costs nothing, and maybe, just maybe, it could save someone." Sophie blinked, looked at her son, then at the man again. In that fleeting moment, she knew one thing for sure. Fate had just placed her inside this story. The music shifted into a tender love song, the lights dimming to spotlight the dance floor. Couples flowed out hand in hand. White gowns spun in the arms of black tuxedos, happy laughter mingling with the lingering notes of violins. At the VIP table, Ethan Blackwood remained still, his wheelchair standing out among the rows of silk-covered chairs. No one came near. There were stolen glances from afar, plenty of whispers, but not a single person dared to approach. He was used to it. For the past 2 years, silence had been his only companion at parties. People came to shake his hand, exchange a few polite words, then slipped away quickly, leaving him with his solitude. A bitter thought struck him. A CEO who can't even find a dance partner at his own event. Pathetic. Ethan took a sip of champagne, the bitterness on his tongue blending with the ache in his chest. He wondered if he should leave early. At the last table, Sophie Miller still watched him. Her heart raced as if some invisible string was pulling her toward that man. She wasn't the impulsive type, but her playful streak sometimes drove her to do things no one expected. Especially when Leo, her little boy, tilted his head and whispered, his eyes sparkling, "Mommy, I think he needs a friend." "Why don't you be his friend?" Sophie laughed, shaking her head. "Sweetheart, I don't even know him." "But do you know anyone else here?" Leo asked innocently. The question caught her off guard. True, in this glittering room, she was just as alone as he was. A reckless thought flashed in her mind. Before she could overthink it, Sophie set down her glass and took a deep breath. "Well, one crazy move won't kill me." She stood up. Crossing between tables, her heels tapped softly against the wooden floor. Curious eyes followed her, silently asking, "What is that girl from the last table doing?" Ethan noticed the woman approaching. He raised a brow. Familiar scenarios ran through his mind. She would offer pity or suggest help. He was tired of both. But Sophie stopped in front of him, leaned slightly forward and smiled. Her brown eyes sparkled with mischief. Then in a gentle yet steady voice she asked, "Would you like to be my date tonight?" The entire ballroom seemed to go silent. Ethan froze. He thought he'd misheard. A date? A young, simple woman was asking him that? Right here, in front of a crowd that treated him like a display piece? He looked into her eyes, searching for pity. But there was none. Only genuine brightness and a playful challenge. "You are joking, right?" he muttered, voice low and rough. Sophie chuckled, tilting her head. "Maybe. But if you say no, you'll ruin the best entrance I've had all night." For a moment, silence stretched. Then the unthinkable Ethan laughed. The sound was rough, low, awkward, like even he had forgotten he still could. How long had it been? 6 months? A year? He couldn't remember. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Whispers erupted. "Who is she? Oh my God, is this pity? But did you see that?" He actually laughed. Ethan set his champagne down and pressed his palm against the edge of the table. A sudden decision lit inside him. He looked up, lips curling faintly. "All right then, miss." "Sophie," she answered quickly, her smile radiant. "Sophie Miller. And tonight, you're my date." Before he could argue, Sophie slipped her arm around, resting her hand naturally on the armrest of his chair. "Shall we?" The whispers burst into a roar. Shocked stares and astonished eyes followed as the girl from the last table wheeled the billionaire out of the shadows and toward the glowing dance floor. Ethan sat in silence, letting her guide him. Yet his heartbeat had changed, not because the wheels turned beneath him, but because, for the first time in months, he no longer felt alone. He looked up and caught Sophie's radiant gaze under the lights. A small spark found its way into his hardened heart. Perhaps tonight would not be like any other night. The lively music filled the hall, lights glittering as they spun across the polished wooden floor. Couples moved gracefully with the rhythm, forming a dazzling circle. And in the middle of it all, Sophie and Ethan in his wheelchair drew every gaze in the room. Some people whispered. A few eyes looked pitying, others curious, even mocking. But Sophie didn't care. She held her head high, her smile radiant, her hands steady on the wheelchair handles, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Ready, Mr. Blackwood?" she murmured just loud enough for him to hear. Ethan arched a brow. "Ready? To be stared at like an animal in a cage?" "No," Sophie chuckled, her eyes sparkling, ready to become the star of this dance floor. Ethan shook his head with a faint, helpless smile. He didn't know why he let her drag him into this madness. But one thing was certain. It had been a very long time since his heart beat this fast. The music surged. Sophie suddenly spun his wheelchair in a circle, like a dancer twirling on the floor. Her blue dress flared lightly, and her brown hair glimmered under the lights. The crowd gasped. Ethan gripped the armrest, startled. "Are you trying to turn me into a race car?" "No," Sophie teased, grinning mischievously. "You're my partner. And this chair is the best pair of legs tonight." She pushed him forward, then pulled back, spun again with grace. Ethan felt his body moving in rhythm, not passively, but as part of it. The sensation was foreign. For months he had sat immobile, watching life from the sidelines. But now, under Sophie's hands, he was inside the dance itself. Laughter broke out. Children cheered. Adults, after a moment of surprise, began clapping along. Not pity anymore, but delighted amazement. "See?" Sophie whispered as she leaned closer, her face near his. "You can dance. You just needed the right partner." Their eyes locked. Warmth pierced through the ice that had caged Ethan's heart for years. And then a high-pitched voice rang out. "Mommy, I want to dance too." Leo darted from the last table straight into the circle, a white napkin tied around his neck like a superhero cape. "Hey, mister, let me dance with you." Ethan burst into real laughter, full, deep, shaking his chest. "And what am I supposed to do, kiddo?" "Easy," Leo announced solemnly as he climbed behind the chair, grabbing the handles with Sophie. "I'll be your extra engine." The ballroom erupted in laughter. Sophie pretended to sigh in exasperation, but her eyes brimmed with joy. "All right then, gentlemen, let's show the world how we can dance." And so, under the crystal lights, an unforgettable scene unfolded. A man in a wheelchair, a young woman filled with light, and a lively 6-year-old boy turning the dance floor into their stage. Sophie spun the chair, Leo shouted, "Vroom, vroom!" at the top of his lungs, and Ethan laughed without stopping. Applause thundered. Cheers rose. The whispers of pity dissolved, replaced by admiration, by awe. In that moment, Ethan realized something. Sophie wasn't looking at him as a disabled man, not as a fallen CEO, not as someone abandoned. In her eyes, he was simply a man who could laugh, who could live, who could bring joy to a child. The feeling was so strong it tightened his chest. The music ended on a long, lingering chord. Sophie stopped the chair, bending low in a dancer's bow. Leo spread his arms wide and shouted, "Ta-da!" The ballroom exploded in applause. Ethan looked around, lips curved in a smile, eyes lit with something even he didn't recognize, genuine happiness. He turned to Sophie and whispered, just for her, "Thank you. It's been so long since I felt alive." Sophie met his gaze, warm and tender. "You're not just alive, Ethan. You're shining." And in that moment, the rest of the world blurred away. Only the three of them remained a small circle, but enough for Ethan to believe that life could begin again. After the final round of applause, the music softened into gentle jazz. The dance floor cleared. Sophie bent down and whispered to Leo, "Want to get some fresh air, superhero?" The boy nodded, clutching a cupcake he just claimed, his eyes still glowing with pride from being the extra engine. She turned to Ethan. "Would you like to step out to the garden? There are string lights there and no whispering people." Ethan's lips curved into a rare smile, one that no longer felt so foreign tonight. "Sounds like heaven." A side door opened, letting in the night breeze. A stone path led to a small garden where golden string lights draped from tree branches, scattering soft, honey-colored light across the grass. From afar, laughter and clinking glasses still echoed, but here everything felt gentler, like a warm blanket laid over a long day. Sophie walked slowly, letting Ethan's wheelchair roll smoothly along the path. Leo darted back and forth, chasing fireflies, proudly holding up his cupcake each time he missed. "I'm not eating it yet. I'm saving it for when I'm really hungry," Sophie laughed. "Eat half now, save the other half for when you're super hungry." Watching them, Ethan felt something inside him loosen, as if watered after a drought. There was something simple in the way they lived, as if happiness wasn't a luxury, but knowing how to split a cupcake in two and laugh about it. They stopped by a wooden bench. Sophie sat down, placing her small purse beside her, tilting her face up to the breeze. Ethan rolled close to the bench, head tilted toward the night sky streaked with drifting clouds. "Thank you for the dance," he said first, his voice low and warm. "Or the glide, to be exact." He glanced at his wheels with a crooked smile. "You're welcome. I just pulled you into the party you deserve to be part of," Sophie replied, her brown eyes suddenly serious. "It's hard when everyone looks at you like a sad story." Ethan stayed quiet for a moment. The wind stirred the hair at his temple, making the lights overhead sway with a faint chime. "After the accident," he began, "I suddenly became someone else in everyone's eyes. First it was the doctors talking about endless rehab years. Then my fiancée, she said she was sorry, said she wasn't strong enough. She left quickly as if staying would drag her down with me. The laughter from the hall faded. Sophie just listened. Ethan drew in a breath and went on. Friends. At first they texted, "You okay, man? Need anything? Let me know." Then it went quiet. I guess it makes sense. I was the one inviting people to parties, the one they saw at the head table. When I couldn't stand anymore, maybe they didn't know where to stand in my life either. He gave a short laugh, not bitter, just tired. So the rehab center became the only place I went regularly. The smell of antiseptic, the machines pulling at my muscles, the same exercises over and over. I once managed billion-dollar deals, yet I had to relearn how to transfer from a wheelchair to a bed without falling. Sophie's throat tightened. She pictured a man who had once ridden horses with pride, who had stood on stages, now practicing how to roll over on a stiff mattress and call it progress. Softly, she said, "But you didn't give up." Ethan's lips curved faintly. "Some days I wanted to, but tonight," he paused, glancing at Leo, who was sitting in the grass, carefully splitting his cupcake in two, eating half and wrapping the other in a napkin. "Tonight it feels like I've learned something else, that a party only really begins when you decide to stay." Sophie chuckled softly. "And I learned a wheelchair can turn into a dance partner if you ignore the way people stare." They sat in silence for a few seconds. The breeze carried the smell of damp leaves, and somewhere nearby, a cricket chirped. "What about you?" Ethan tilted his head. "You don't seem like someone who'd strike up a conversation with a stranger, especially a noisy one like me." He tapped the chair lightly, joking to lighten the mood. Sophie pressed her lips together, her hands tightening and loosening in her lap. "I was left behind too," she said carefully, choosing each word. "Not in an accident. At a wedding, my own." Ethan turned fully, his gray eyes darkening. "That day," Sophie continued, "the flowers were baby's breath. The dress borrowed from my cousin was a little loose at the shoulders. I stood behind the thin curtain of the hall, holding the bouquet as the music began. Everyone buzzing, my mother whispering, 'Sweetheart, keep smiling.' Then the groom's phone rang. She laughed dryly. I couldn't hear the other side, just saw his face change. A moment later he came to me and apologized. Said he couldn't. Said he wasn't ready to be a father." Her voice caught. "I was already pregnant with Leo." Ethan let out a long breath. "Did you stay in the hall?" "I walked out." Through the back door, Sophie lifted her eyes to the string lights. "I thought I'd escape the humiliation, but it followed me for years. The neighbors' looks, my parents' what-ifs, the double shifts just to make rent. I guess I got used to sitting at the last table, where no one calls your name." She glanced at the grass, her smile oddly soft. "Funny, isn't it? Tonight you sat alone at the VIP table, and I sat alone by the door. Both of us, abandoned at a wedding." Ethan laughed, a laugh with tears hiding somewhere behind it. "I was the abandoned guest, and you were the abandoned bride?" His voice shifted, slipping naturally into you instead of Miss Miller, as if their stories had closed the gap. "Fate has a cruel sense of humor." "Yeah," Sophie shrugged. "If life were a movie, This would be the part where the writer shoves two people into the same quiet hallway to breathe. She winked, borrowing playfulness to mask the sting at her eyes. A loud slurp broke the moment. Leo looked up, crumbs on his face, eyes wide. "Mommy, I ate the part I was saving." Sophie and Ethan exchanged a look, then laughed together. Sophie handed him a napkin, pretending to scold. "That's fine. When we're super hungry, we'll just eat the wind." "What does wind taste like?" Leo asked curiously. "Freedom," Ethan answered, making Leo nod solemnly as if he understood perfectly. The light moment drifted by. Sophie turned back to Ethan, her voice gentle. "You know, I used to hate rooms with too many bright lights. They made every flaw feel magnified. But here, with these string lights, I just see a path lit enough to keep walking." Ethan touched the rim of his wheel, his fingers trembling slightly as if brushing against something fragile. "And me," he whispered, "for the first time in 2 years, I'm not afraid to go back inside, because now I know someone will look at me and see a man, not a tragedy." Sophie looked at him for a long moment, her eyes slowly softening. "I don't see you as a tragedy, Ethan. I see a man learning to redefine what it means to stand. Whether sitting or standing, it still belongs to you." Another breeze carried the scent of jasmine. From inside, the MC called everyone to the stage for the bouquet toss. Leo leapt up. "Mommy, let's go catch the flowers. For Mr. Ethan." The innocent suggestion made both adults laugh. "Good idea," Sophie said, patting his shoulder. "But I think Mr. Ethan needs a different kind of flower." "What kind?" Leo asked. Ethan thought for a moment, then said, half joking, half true, "The kind you don't toss. The kind you place in someone's hands." All three fell quiet, letting the words rest under the lights. Not a promise, not a dream, just a possibility. And that was enough warmth. "Let's go back in," Sophie said gently but firmly. "We've stood outside long enough." She paused, glancing at Ethan as if worried about her choice of words, but he smiled and shook his head reassuringly. "Yes, back in," he echoed, giving his wheel a push. "Tonight, I don't plan to sit alone at a table again." Leo ran ahead, waving his empty cupcake wrapper like a flag. Sophie walked behind Ethan, her hand resting on the chair's handle, not to push, but to stand beside him. The door opened, music rushed out, light spilled over their faces, and in the sea of people, they no longer felt lost. A deep connection had taken root, not through vows, but through their shared choice to return to the bright room. This time, neither would leave the other behind. The next morning, the little cafe on Maple Street was busier than usual. The aroma of freshly roasted coffee mingled with the scent of warm waffles, blending into the clatter of grinders and the soft chime of spoons against cups. Behind the counter, Sophie tied the faded brown apron tighter and greeted a regular who always ordered a low-foam latte. She'd worked part-time here for 2 years, juggling it with evening shifts at the bookstore to cover expenses. Still, every morning she wore the same bright smile, as if no burden ever weighed on her shoulders. Suddenly, a stir rose at the door. A flower deliveryman walked in, arms full of a bouquet so large it hid his face. Crimson roses mixed with baby's breath, elegantly wrapped in craft paper. "For Sophie Miller," the delivery man cleared his throat. The whole cafe turned. Sophie's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. She accepted the bouquet, her hands trembling slightly, and pulled out the small card tucked inside. It read only one line: "The man you asked to be your date at the wedding." No name, no signature. Sophie let out a startled laugh. Around her, customers whispered, glancing with curiosity. She covered her mouth, her cheeks burning hot. "Mommy!" Leo leapt up from the corner table, eyes wide as saucers. "It's from the wheelchair man, isn't it?" "I knew it. I told you he liked you." The whole cafe burst out laughing. Sophie quickly set the bouquet on the counter, ruffling her son's hair. "Leo, hush!" But inside, warmth bloomed. It had been so long since someone remembered her in such a sweet way. That afternoon, after her shift ended, Sophie still couldn't stop glancing at the bouquet. A co-worker teased, "So, are you going tonight?" A billionaire in a wheelchair, more romantic than any drama series. Sophie blushed, but eventually pulled out her phone and typed a message to the number written on the card. I'm free tonight. Where do you want to go, Mr. Blackwood? The reply came instantly, as if he had been waiting. Somewhere roses aren't trampled by high heels. I'll pick you up at 7. Sophie laughed out loud, unable to hide her nervous excitement. The restaurant Ethan chose wasn't a glittering high-end venue, but a small Italian place by the river, with wooden tables and golden candlelight. No paparazzi, no VIPs, just the scent of baking pizza and the strum of a warm guitar. Ethan was already at the table when Sophie arrived, dressed in a simple navy suit. The wheelchair was still there, but tonight his gaze carried a calmer ease. You beat me here, Sophie teased as she sat down. Habit of someone who always likes to be in control, Ethan replied, then arched a brow. But I think I've been losing control since I agreed to be your date. Sophie laughed. That's a quick confession. He took a sip of wine, pretending to be cool. Think of it as an after-hours business meeting. Oh, then I should charge you consulting fees, Sophie winked. Ethan nearly choked on his wine, the cold CEO, undone by her carefree humor. He coughed lightly, then couldn't help but laugh. Leo sat beside his mother, studying the menu with serious eyes. Mommy, they have spaghetti with meatballs. I want that. But I think Mr. Ethan should eat pizza. Pizza's easier to cut. Are you trying to manage his meal? Sophie teased. No, I'm the matchmaker, Leo said matter-of-factly. If you both eat the same thing, you'll match better, so it's easier to fall in love. Ethan almost choked again. He looked at Sophie, catching her blushing and laughing at the same time, her eyes sparkling. In that instant, he didn't just see a weary single mother. He saw a radiant, captivating woman. Throughout dinner, Ethan tried to keep his composure, but Sophie kept breaking down his walls. Do you often send flowers to women? She asked, cutting into her lasagna. No, he answered curtly. Then I suppose you send checks instead. Ethan's head shot up, surprised, before he burst out laughing. Yes, and they call me practical. Well, I like flowers better. They're cheaper, but truer, Sophie said softly. He paused, then admitted quietly. Truer. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Just then Leo chimed in. You're smiling more than yesterday, Mr. Ethan. Mommy made you smile. Ethan looked at the boy, then back at Sophie. Her eyes flickered with shyness, but also with a gentle glow, like a secret just revealed. Dinner ended with sweet tiramisu. Ethan set down his spoon and looked straight at Sophie. Thank you for coming. I think I'd forgotten how much fun conversation could be. Sophie shrugged with a small smile. Thank you for the flowers. I think I'd forgotten how it felt to be remembered. In that moment, no music or lights were needed. The connection simply existed. Leo yawned, rubbing his eyes, but still managed to add, Send flowers again tomorrow, okay? Mommy really likes them. Both adults laughed. Ethan leaned closer, speaking low so only Sophie could hear. If you want, I'll send them every day. Sophie met his eyes, her heart skipping. For the first time in years, she felt like a woman again, not just a single mother. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands are listening and sharing together. That morning, Ethan woke in his silent penthouse. Pale sunlight slipped through the heavy curtains, but it couldn't drive away the gloom hanging over him. His phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand. It was James, his assistant, sounding urgent. Mr. Blackwood, the press. They all ran the story this morning. You'd better prepare yourself. Ethan frowned. What story? James hesitated, then delivered the blow. Billionaire in a wheelchair pitied by a poor single mother. Ethan gripped the phone tight, each word slicing into an unhealed wound. He opened his tablet, headlines screamed back at him, splashed with photos of him laughing on the dance floor beside Sophie and Leo. That rare smile of his, instead of being proof of joy, was twisted into fuel for gossip and pity. Even the smallest happiness is turned into a joke, he muttered, voice hoarse. The whole day he spiraled. All his deepest fears, the pitying looks, the cruel whispers now lay bare. And worse, Sophie and Leo were dragged into it. I was wrong to pull them into this. They don't deserve to sink in my mud. When Sophie called that afternoon, inviting him for a walk with Leo. He shut her down with a cold reply. "I'm busy. I'll be in touch." Sophie froze. She heard it in the distance in his voice, the same tone she despised in those who had turned their backs on her. That night, Sophie couldn't take it anymore. She dropped Leo off with the neighbor and went straight to Ethan's penthouse. He sat by the glass wall, the wheelchair as silent as part of his body. The screen before him still glared with the articles. When he saw her, he startled, then frowned. "You shouldn't have come." Arms crossed, Sophie's brown eyes blazed. "Then where should I be?" Sitting in the cafe, reading those cheap headlines and pretending to believe them? Ethan turned away, voice taut. "You don't understand. The media, they can crush a life. I've lived with it. But you and Leo, I can't let you be dragged in." Sophie stepped closer, her voice almost a challenge. "Do you think I'm that fragile? My fiancé left me at the altar. I've raised my son alone for 6 years. And you think a few tabloid headlines can scare me off?" Ethan bit his lip. His eyes glimmered with torment. "Sophie, you don't get it. They'll say you're only with me out of pity. Or worse, for money. You don't deserve that." Her breath caught. The words cut. For a moment, her heart ached. Then she exhaled sharply, voice trembling with fury. "You really think that's why I chose you? Out of pity?" Ethan said nothing. Sophie stepped closer, eyes shining with tears. "Listen to me, Ethan Blackwood. I don't pity you. I choose you because you make me laugh, because you make me feel respected, because when I'm with you, I'm not just the abandoned single mom. I feel like a woman, and you are a man." The words fell heavy, like a hammer breaking stone. Ethan's gray eyes flickered, shaken. His voice cracked. Memories pounded Clara walking away, friends fading, endless hours of failed therapy. He had built walls around himself, convinced no one truly wanted to stay. But Sophie's words split those walls wide open. "You want to push me away?" Sophie's voice wavered, but her resolve was steel. "Fine, but be honest. Are you doing it to protect me, or to protect your own pride and fear?" Ethan froze. The question struck deep. He did want to protect her, but he was also afraid she'd leave like the others, so he thought he'd shove her away first. His shoulders trembled. I don't know what to believe anymore, Sophie. Everyone has left me." Sophie placed her hand firmly on his, her tone gentler but unyielding. "I'm not everyone, and I'm not leaving unless you make me." The tension snapped the air tight, and for the first time in 2 years, Ethan felt tears rise. He turned away, but Sophie saw. Silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of city traffic below. At last, Ethan exhaled, dropping the armor. "I'm terrified. Terrified of losing you before I even truly have you." Sophie squeezed his hand. "Then don't lose me. It's that simple." He looked up, and in her eyes he saw no pity, no hesitation. Only a fierce steadiness, the same strength that had carried her through years of single motherhood. And in that moment, Ethan understood. If he kept hiding behind the walls of fear, he would lose her. And this time, he would never forgive himself. Their fight was not gentle. It was raw and painful, leaving both of them shaken. But in those cracks, light seeped in. Ethan realized that to love and to be loved, he would have to let those walls fall. That night, Sophie left with her shoulders taut, but her gaze steady. Ethan remained, staring out over the city. For the first time in years, the sky above didn't look like only darkness. The Blackwood Capital boardroom was strung as tight as a bow. On the giant screen, a report detailing gaps in the deal with their Japanese partner, the Morimoto Group, glowed. A project once expected to bring in billions and serve as a springboard into the Asian market now sat at a standstill. Mr. Parker, a longtime shareholder, leaned heavily on the table, his tone grave. "Mr. Blackwood, the Japanese value presence. You cannot personally travel to Tokyo nor take part in their rituals. That is why they hesitate. We cannot allow this company to be held back simply because of your condition." "My condition?" Ethan repeated, his gray eyes turning to ice. A younger shareholder cut in. Forgive me, but it's the truth. Business waits for no one. Blackwood needs someone who can stand, walk, someone who shows strength to our partners. The room went silent. Ethan gripped the rim of his wheels, the sting of humiliation burning like an old wound torn open. It felt as if all his intellect and effort had been erased, reduced to two useless legs. Then James, his assistant, broke the silence. The Morimoto delegation is currently in New York. They've asked for a private dinner before making their final decision. All eyes shifted to Ethan. This was his last chance. If it failed, the board would have the perfect excuse to demand he step aside. Ethan nodded, his voice steady and low. I'll meet them. The riverside Japanese restaurant exuded elegance, with tatami mats, delicate decor, and the faint fragrance of green tea. Ethan rolled in, Sophie at his side in a simple cream-colored dress. It wasn't glamorous, but it radiated quiet grace. James leaned in and whispered, Ms. Miller can help if they need soft translation. And to set the tone, Sophie smiled. I only came for the sushi, but if saving a company is on the menu, I'm ready. Ethan chuckled for the first time that day, and the tension eased. At the head of the table sat Mr. Morimoto, a stern middle-aged man, and his wife. They bowed politely, their eyes sharp and observant. The opening conversation was heavy. Ethan laid out vision, numbers, and strategy. Yet Mr. Morimoto's face stayed unmoved, his words few, his glances slipping now and then to his wife in Japanese. The board had been partly right. The image of a CEO in a wheelchair lacked the kind of force they expected. Sophie noticed, and when the sashimi arrived, she leaned forward. With her chopsticks, she clumsily dropped a slice of fish into her soy dish, splashing it. Oh no, she laughed. I've been practicing for 3 weeks and still can't master this. Mr. Morimoto, do you have any secrets so I don't keep turning sushi into soup? For the first time, Mrs. Morimoto covered her mouth, giggling. Mr. Morimoto's stern face softened as he glanced at his wife. Ms. Miller, in Japan, we believe it takes a lifetime to truly master chopsticks. You are still young. You have plenty of time. The table laughed. The tension eased. Sophie went on warmly. Luckily, I'm not here to prove I'm good with chopsticks. I'm here because I believe this company and the man beside me know how to grasp what really matters. Not legs, but vision. Her words landed. Mrs. Morimoto's eyes lit up, and she whispered something to her husband. Mr. Morimoto paused, then gave the faintest nod. Ethan seized the moment, laying out the mutual benefits. This time, Mr. Morimoto listened intently, no longer staring at the chair, but at the man who spoke with conviction. At the close of dinner, when tea was poured, Mr. Morimoto said slowly, Blackwood Capital has a leader who listens and an ally who inspires trust. I believe we can sign. Ethan's grip tightened on the armrest, his pulse racing. He bowed deeply, his voice steady. Arigatou gozaimasu. Mrs. Morimoto turned to Sophie with a warm smile. Thank you for bringing warmth to this evening. Back in the car, Ethan sat quietly for a long moment. The city lights shimmered across the river, mirrored in his eyes. Sophie, he said softly. Do you realize what you just did? You saved an entire company. Sophie laughed. No, I just dropped a piece of sashimi. Ethan laughed out loud, a rare sound lighter than it had been in years. Looking at her, for the first time, he didn't feel like a burden in business. Instead, he saw a partner, someone who could stand in the middle of cold numbers and breathe warmth into them. In his heart, one truth rang clear. Sophie didn't just bring him smiles. She gave him the strength to keep standing in his own way. The physical therapy room gleamed with bright lights, the sharp scent of antiseptic mingling with the heat of menthol balm. Parallel steel bars stretched across the room, where patients practiced one shaky step at a time. Machines hummed. Wheels creaked against the floor. Ethan sat at the edge of his wheelchair, sweat already beading on his temple. Though he hadn't moved yet, his therapist, Mr. Harris, stood nearby, stern but patient. Mr. Blackwood, today we'll try standing. No steps, just standing. I'll be right here. Ethan gave a slight nod. His large hands clenched the chair's frame, veins rising. He had been waiting for this day, the day he would finally test his body against the prison of the chair. From the corner, Sophie watched, her heart pounding. Ever since she'd met him, she had seen how his gray eyes masked so much pride. And today, those eyes burned again, with hope and fear. "Ready," Harris said. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Ethan pushed with his arms, summoning every ounce of strength into his long-forgotten legs. Muscles trembled. Sweat dripped onto the floor. For a split second, his knees felt taut, as if they remembered the function they had abandoned. Then thud, his body collapsed. Ethan fell hard, his knees striking the floor with a brutal crack. "Ethan!" Sophie cried, rushing forward. He braced his hands, but they shook too violently to hold him up. His face twisted, his breath ragged like a cornered animal. "Enough!" Ethan roared, his voice raw. "I can't do it. I'm nothing but a cripple in a chair. All this effort is pointless." The words rang harshly, echoing off the sterile walls. Harris started forward, but Sophie was already kneeling in front of Ethan, wrapping her arms around him. He trembled violently in her embrace, anger, despair, and agony colliding inside him. His chest heaved, his breath breaking, as if he wanted to sob but refused. Sophie held him tighter, her voice breaking but strangely laughing at the same time, enough to stop Harris in his tracks. "Listen to me, Ethan. If you spend the rest of your life in that chair, I'll still be here. Do you understand? I'm with you, for you, not for your legs." Ethan froze. Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks, dampening his shoulder. "But if you want to walk, then I'll walk with you. Step by step, slowly stumbling, I'll still be here. No effort is wasted as long as you keep trying." The room went quiet, filled only with muffled sobs. Ethan shut his eyes, letting the first tears in years fall, sliding into Sophie's hair. For the first time, he let himself break, and for the first time, he believed he didn't have to fight alone. Harris turned away, pretending to be busy with equipment, leaving them the space they needed. Sophie pressed closer, her heartbeat pounding against his. "You don't need to be perfect, Ethan. You just need to be yourself. And if you need it, I'll be the legs you can lean on." A hoarse laugh burst from him between the tears. "You're insane." "Yeah," Sophie whispered back, laughing through her tears. "But the right kind of insane. And I'm not leaving you." In that moment, Ethan felt the darkness inside him crack just enough for light to seep through. Not the light of promises that he'd walk again overnight, but the light of hope, the light of love without conditions. He lifted his head and met Sophie's gaze, and for the first time in his life, he believed that even if his legs never moved again, he could still keep moving forward, because beside him was someone who would always place her hand in his and walk the whole road with him. The ballroom of the Metropole Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers. On tables draped in pristine white linens sat bouquets of yellow roses, mingled with hydrangea flowers symbolizing faith and gratitude. Tonight, Ethan Blackwood's name was behind a charity gala for orphans, his first public appearance in years after retreating from the press. At a table near the stage, Sophie gently squeezed her son's hand. Leo gazed around with wide, shining eyes, whispering, "Mommy, everyone here looks like they're in a movie. Do I need to bow or something?" Sophie laughed, straightening his tiny tie. "No, sweetheart. Just smile. Your smile makes everyone happy." From across the room, Ethan wheeled toward them, his face calm, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of nerves. But when he saw Sophie and Leo, his shoulders eased, and the faintest smile broke through. "You came," he said softly. "Of course," Sophie replied, her warm brown eyes steady. "This is your night." On stage, the spotlight beamed down on the wooden podium. Ethan rolled up, and the murmurs in the ballroom fell away. The image of a CEO in a wheelchair, once fodder for ridicule, now drew silence and expectation. "Thank you all for being here," his deep voice carried, firm and clear. "I once believed that when my legs could no longer hold me, I had nothing left to give. But I've learned that we can always give with our hearts, with our minds, and with our faith. Tonight, I want to give that faith to the children who never had a choice in their circumstances." Applause thundered, cameras flashed, As Ethan continued his speech, Leo, who had been sitting still, suddenly bounded onto the stage. Sophie gasped, leapt to her feet, but before she could stop him, the boy grabbed Ethan's hand and tugged the microphone down to his level. "Hello, everybody," Leo's small voice rang out, high but firm. "I'm Leo. I came here with Mommy and—" He paused, turned to Ethan, his eyes shimmering with emotion. "With Dad for today." The entire hall froze. Then a wave of laughter and soft gasps rolled through, touched with awe. Cameras fired in bursts, capturing the 6-year-old hugging the arm of the man in the wheelchair with proud innocence. Ethan's heart clenched. For a moment he couldn't breathe. No one had ever called him Dad before, and now from the lips of a child he already loved like his own, it felt like the most sacred word in the world. He bent down, his hand resting firmly on Leo's small shoulder. His voice cracked, but carried, "And I'm proud to be your dad." Not just today. The ballroom erupted into applause. Sophie rushed on stage, scooping Leo up, her cheeks red with panic. "Leo! What are you doing? This isn't—" But Ethan raised a hand, stopping her. His eyes locked on Sophie's, unflinching, for the first time under the blaze of hundreds of flashing lights. He clasped her hand tightly. His voice echoed through the hall. "I want everyone here to know family isn't always written in blood. Sometimes it's a choice, and tonight I choose her and this boy as my family." For one breathless second, silence hung. Then the entire hall rose to its feet, applause crashing like waves. Many wiped tears from their eyes. In the front row, Mrs. Morimoto smiled, nodding her approval. Cameras flared, seizing the image of a billionaire in a wheelchair, holding hands with a simple woman and her child, an image warmer than any speech. Later, when the crowd had dispersed, Sophie sat with Ethan in a quiet hallway. Her cheeks still burned. "You just told an entire ballroom that Leo and I are your family. Do you know what the press will say?" Ethan turned to her with a smile, his expression unguarded, gentle. "Let them write. For once, I want the press to tell the truth." Sophie couldn't find words. Under the golden glow of the sconces, his face no longer carried its cold armor. Only warmth, only peace. Leo rested his head on Ethan's shoulder, eyelids heavy. "See? I was right, Daddy." Ethan chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to the boy's messy hair. "Yes, Daddy's right here." Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. The little cafe on Maple Street was more radiant than ever that night. Golden string lights draped across the wooden ceiling, while the tables and chairs had been pushed aside, leaving a wide open space in the center. On the bar, jars of white baby's breath mixed with crimson roses released a gentle fragrance. Sophie stepped inside, slightly taken aback. She had just finished her shift at the bookstore and was still in her simple, pale blue dress. The cafe felt both achingly familiar and strangely transformed. Her heart raced. "Mommy, look!" Leo tugged her hand excitedly. He beamed when he spotted a small circle of familiar faces, a few of Ethan's close colleagues, even James, his personal assistant. All of them smiled knowingly, their eyes gleaming as if they were in on a secret about to unfold. In the middle of the room sat Ethan, a sleek black suit, neatly combed hair, and in his hands a vibrant bouquet of flowers. He wasn't the cold CEO of Blackwood Capital, nor the lonely man at the VIP table she had once seen. He was Ethan, the man who had stepped into Sophie's life and lit it up. When their eyes met, Sophie's breath caught. She knew something was coming, but nothing could prepare her for the wave of emotion that followed. Ethan wheeled forward, his steel gray eyes locking onto hers. He extended the bouquet, his deep voice carrying through the quiet cafe, husky with emotion. "The last time, you invited me to be your date at a wedding. Tonight, let me invite you to be my partner for life." The cafe fell into stunned silence. For a moment, Sophie could only stand there, her hands trembling. Tears welled, blurring her vision. Her heart tightened, then burst open into a happiness she had never known. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked at her, eyes shining. stripped of every barrier. Sophie, I don't know how far I can go, but I do know this. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Leo. Sophie burst into tears, nodding repeatedly, her lips trembling into a radiant smile. Yes, I will. The cafe erupted in applause. James whistled. Sophie's friends hugged one another, eyes glistening. Leo leapt into the air, shouting at the top of his lungs, I finally have a dad! Laughter rippled through the room, mixed with tears. Sophie hugged her son tightly, then turned to throw her arms around Ethan, her shoulders shaking with joy. Ethan wrapped her in his arms, holding her as if he'd never let go. In that moment, there was no wheelchair, no pitying stares, only the family he had chosen. When the crowd gave them space, Sophie knelt so she was level with his eyes. Do you have any idea how much you just melted my heart? Ethan's smile softened, his gaze tender. I know. And I hope I can do that every single day for the rest of our lives. Sophie laughed through her tears, pressing her forehead gently against his. You already have. No one in the cafe knew that beyond the bouquet and the proposal, Ethan held a secret of his own. After months of therapy, his legs had begun to show signs of progress. The attempts to stand, the painful falls, the tears Sophie had caught on her shoulder, all of it was starting to yield results. But he didn't say a word. He wanted to keep it until another day. The day of their real wedding, the day he would rise not only in her heart, but before everyone's eyes. The bells rang out, clear and bright, echoing through the old cathedral. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting a shimmering rainbow effect on the aisle. Everyone turned, hushed, as the bride appeared. Sophie walked in, her simple wedding gown unadorned with glitter but radiant beyond measure. Her smile shone like a guiding light. With every step she took, white petals floated to the ground, sketching a path of happiness. At the end of the aisle, Ethan waited in his familiar wheelchair. His black tuxedo framed his broad shoulders, his face calm, but his eyes burned with brilliance. As Sophie drew closer, his heart pounded, as if all the years of darkness had only been leading him to this moment. Soft whispers rippled through the pews, not pity, but awe. Here was a CEO once branded crippled, now waiting proudly for the love of his life. Sophie stopped before him. Ethan lifted his gaze, his storm gray eyes locking onto her warm brown ones. The whole world seemed to dissolve, leaving only the two of them as it had in the cafe the night he proposed, as it had behind the scenes of that wedding years ago. The priest's solemn voice rose beneath the vaulted ceiling. Ethan Blackwood, do you take Sophie Miller to love and to cherish, in wealth and in want, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? Ethan's voice was low but unshakable. I do. The priest turned. Sophie Miller, do you take Ethan Blackwood to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Tears spilled down her cheeks as she smiled. I do. The cathedral erupted in applause, mingling with the soft swell of organ music. Then came the words, you may kiss the bride. Sophie leaned down, ready to kiss him as she had countless times before. But Ethan placed his hands on the armrests and drew a deep breath. And to everyone's astonishment, he pushed himself upward. His legs trembled as his whole body battled against gravity, but inch by inch, he rose. James appeared quickly with a pair of crutches hidden behind the altar, but Ethan only gripped one loosely. He wanted his legs to bear the weight, even if only for a few seconds. The room fell silent, breathless. Sophie froze, her hands trembling against her lips. Tears streamed faster, blurring her vision. Ethan turned, a radiant smile breaking across his face. I want you to have a memory you'll never forget, the moment your groom stood to kiss you. And then, for the first time since the accident, his legs held firm as he bent down and pressed the most sacred kiss to Sophie's lips. The cathedral exploded with applause and cheers. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Leo jumped up and shouted, voice ringing to the rafters, Daddy is standing! Daddy is a superhero! Laughter and tears swirled together, creating the most beautiful music of love. The reception burst alive afterward, bathed in lights and fireworks. As the first dance began, Ethan still held onto the crutches, But Sophie's hand clasped his, and Leo clung to his leg, pulling the three of them together onto the dance floor. Guests cheered as they watched, a family of three hand in hand, swaying beneath golden lights. Ethan stood, not perfectly, not forever, but enough to hold Sophie and Leo in the same embrace. Sophie lifted her face, tears mingling with her smile. Ethan leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Thank you for making me stand, not just with my legs, but with my heart." She squeezed his hand tight. "And I'll walk with you every step." Leo looked up, innocent and fierce. "We're a team forever." The music swelled. Fireworks burst outside the cathedral windows, flooding the hall with radiant light. Amidst cheers and endless applause, the little family held each other close. Three pieces that once felt broken, now finally one perfect whole.